Behold, the Garden of Eden. All the pieces are in place: Adam, Eve, the tree of knowledge. But in the pond, just beneath the Creator's feet, something is stirring, something that was never given a name. It's the first hint of rot at the very heart of creation, a quiet whisper of madness in the grand divine design. For 500 years, we have stared into these paintings, and they have stared back. The canvases of a man we know almost nothing about. Was he a prophet who had seen the true face of hell? Or was his brush guided not by a stroke of genius, but by a feverish sickness, one that conjured nightmares into waking life? To find the answer, we can't just look at his paintings. We must dare to step inside. In the annals of art history, there is scarcely a figure to rival Hieronymus Bosch. While Da Vinci was putting the finishing touches on the Mona Lisa and Michelangelo was painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, this Netherlandish painter was churning out nightmarish, infernal landscapes populated by grotesque and absurd creatures. But why did this artist create such disturbing canvases? Are they the fruit of a rich imagination, or the product of a troubled mind, tormented by vivid and terrifying hallucinations? Let's explore the paintings of Hieronymus Bosch and try to discern the personality of the artist behind his strange and unsettling works. Next to nothing is known about Bosch's life. Even the portrait of him you see now was painted 30 years after his death. We know he was born around the middle of the 15th century and probably spent most of his life in the Netherlandish town of Hertogenbosch. He grew up in an age of profound religious anxiety. In late medieval Christianity, ideas about sin, death, and the devil were becoming more elaborate, and depictions of hell, such as Dante's Inferno, were becoming more vivid. There was a genuine fear that demonic forces were living among men, a fear that led to Europe's first witch hunts, which would only intensify in the centuries to come. This was the spiritual atmosphere in which Hieronymus Bosch was formed, one where piety and paranoia became inextricably intertwined. This clearly had a profound impact on him, as an obsession with the theme of sin and punishment runs through all his work. Let's start with his most famous painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights. It's a triptych, its 3 panels depicting 3 extraordinary scenes. The first, here on the left, is based on the biblical story of Adam and Eve. Against the backdrop of a paradise garden, we see familiar animals like elephants and giraffes, but right below them is a bizarre, 2-legged, dog-like creature. Over here, a bird with a frog's mouth is devouring a toad, and from this pond emerge hideous, multi-headed reptiles. Even in paradise, there is already a sense of dissonance, a foreshadowing of the horrors to come. The central panel is a non-biblical scene depicting hundreds of naked people frolicking in a lush garden. The background is dominated by bizarre organic structures, lending the whole thing an otherworldly feel. The level of detail is astounding, but the highlights include people crawling inside a giant egg, a dancing, multi-legged owl, and finally, a comely unicorn with feline features. The inhabitants of this panel seem to be indulging in lust and gluttony, 2 of the 7 deadly sins. The final panel is a disturbing vision of hell, with all manner of eccentric and horrifying punishments. Down below, we see a pig dressed in a nun's habit. She is trying to force someone to sign a deal with the devil. This bird-like demon consumes its helpless victims and then excretes them into the cesspit below. Over here we have a demonic choir master conducting a funeral dirge, crucifying a man on a giant lyre. He also appears to be tattooing a musical score onto the buttocks of another victim. Some enthusiasts have actually transcribed this melody, and it sounds a little something like this. The center of the composition is dominated by the so-called tree man, named for his trunk-like legs. Some believe his face is a self-portrait of the artist. There are numerous interpretations of the work as a whole, and all its tiny scenes carry their own theological messages. You could spend hours deciphering just one of them, but there is one idea that most agree on. It's a cautionary tale against lust and the pursuit of carnal pleasures. The fear of sin, death, and damnation are the themes of many of Bosch's paintings. These include The Last Judgment, another triptych where he illustrates apocalyptic scenes from the Book of Revelation. There are many non-biblical elements in this work, such as little gnomes and a giant human-bird hybrid, but believe it or not, this is not too far off from the source material. As we've seen in another of my videos, the original biblical texts mention giant locusts with human heads and scorpion stingers. I suppose Bosch was on the right track. Painting after painting, Bosch creates horrific scenes, each more absurd than the last. The hallmark of his work are the bizarre creatures that can be found in many of his surviving sketches, one of which depicts the tree man we saw earlier. But where on earth did Hieronymus Bosch get his inspiration? There are many theories, but a popular one suggests that he suffered from intense and terrifying hallucinations, an idea we can explore through his next work. Many of Bosch's paintings are dedicated to Saint Anthony. He was a hermit monk who lived in the Egyptian desert in the 4th century. According to Christian tradition, he was often tormented by demons. This painting, The Temptation of Saint Anthony, is typical of Bosch. It depicts the trials the saint was rumored to have endured and features a host of monsters, including this ice-skating, chicken-like demon with floppy ears. A personal favorite of mine. Bosch painted 2 other pictures of Saint Anthony. The fact that he gave him more attention than any other saint may be significant. You see, there is a disease known as Saint Anthony's fire. You can contract it by eating a poisonous black fungus called ergot, which grows on rye crops. The symptoms include sores, seizures, and an unbearable burning sensation in the limbs. But another unusual effect of consuming ergot is frightening, all-consuming hallucinations that can last for hours. It is believed to have been the cause of many of the dancing plagues recorded in the Middle Ages. Entire towns would inexplicably dance day and night, with some residents dropping dead from exhaustion. In the mid-20th century, it was discovered that when baked in an oven, ergot transforms into a form of lysergic acid diethylamide, also known as LSD. Some believe that Bosch actually suffered from St. Anthony's fire and may have based his paintings on his own terrifying hallucinations. Creating so many paintings dedicated to St. Anthony might have been a form of prayerful vow, made in the hope that the saint would rid him of the debilitating disease. It's an interesting theory, but it's also very difficult to prove. As mentioned, we know almost nothing about Bosch's life, so there's no way to know if he actually suffered from this ailment. The same goes for arguments suggesting that Bosch was simply insane. There is simply no evidence to confirm or deny it. I think there's another explanation, one that has far more evidence behind it. Hieronymus Bosch wasn't the only artist painting demons. Even Michelangelo painted a picture of Saint Anthony being lifted into the air by grotesque monsters. Both artists are part of a much older tradition, the bizarre world of medieval Christian art. A deep dive into illustrated Bibles and early bestiaries reveals a whole gallery of strange and frightening imagery. Terrifying descriptions of hell, grotesque monsters, and demons galore. All of this predated Bosch and his Renaissance contemporaries. In the margins of many illuminated manuscripts, you can find a whole variety of bizarre and whimsical monsters. Some of them bear a remote resemblance to Bosch's work. It is possible, and even likely, that he was reproducing these creatures in his own art. This is definitely the case with the giraffe we saw earlier. Art historians believe he based his depiction on an illustration found in an early travelogue. When compared, the two drawings show a striking resemblance. People were painting hell and demons long before Hieronymus Bosch, but you could say he perfected the art form. As a true Renaissance artist, he took the flat images of the past and transformed them, adding perspective and rich color, and brought them to life with his own sinister imagination. Of course, not all of Bosch's paintings are demonic hellscapes. Like many painters of his time, he created works about the life of Jesus or about what he saw around him. But even in his most mundane subjects, you're always liable to spot a monster or two. Unfortunately, we know almost nothing about the life of Hieronymus Bosch, and only a shadow of the man himself emerges from his paintings. He clearly possessed a dark and vivid imagination, and matters of religion and morality were obviously on his mind. After his death in 1516, the next generation of Netherlandish painters was clearly inspired by Bosch's work. In the centuries that followed, artists came to see him as one of the first pioneers of surrealism, one of the first to draw images directly from his imagination. The dark, apocalyptic visions of Hieronymus Bosch continue to mesmerize all who look upon his paintings and offer a grim glimpse of what awaits us in the hereafter.